I was bullied.
Now was a bully. Bryan's stutter was one of the many things that I bullied him over.
I always believed that I didn't have anyone to talk to or share what I was going through.
It's amazing how a sincere, simple apology can change everything.
Hi everybody. So, the end of February this week, and the last few weeks, the news has been jam-packed with so many incidents, suicides, stories, interesting casting choices in musicals that have provoked all sorts of outrage. Biggest stars in the world who are being booed for all sorts of manner of reasons, both in sport and in entertainment. Let's get into it, Clint.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, before we do, though, I want to address something that's been happening to me online. And I think it's really important to address it because we talk about labeling a lot and the power of labels and the stigma attached to labels. We talk a lot about it in our presentation. I think we've even spoken about it on the podcast before. But, you know, one of the things that we talk about that I think we should almost repeat now in our keynote is what bullying is and what bullying is not.
Right.
So why don't we just start with that, and then I'll tell you the story of what's going on my Facebook page.
Okay. So we always like to clarify that there's always complexities that cloud and sometimes overshadow what is at root cause, what is and isn't bullying. Bullying is not a once-off, careless or unkind remark that is easily remedied, and any damage can be mitigated.
We don't like to think of gaslighting, ghosting someone, or stigmatizing someone as bullying behaviors.
But those absolutely are, especially when they're deliberate, calculated, targeted, repetitive acts that are designed to denigrate, humiliate, and cause harm.
Absolutely. And as important as it is to define bullying, it's just as important not to dilute the word by mischaracterizing every incident we don't like as bullying.
Sure. Many people who bully will excuse it, and they'll say, you know, they'll dismiss hurtful and cruel words and commentary as banter, or they'll say, or not say, they'll gaslight you into and say, listen, what's your problem? You can't take a joke, or I was only joking.
So, and that's the critical point, because banter is only banter if there's an even playing field. Because as we've also said, bullying is always about a disproportionate abuse of power, one way or the other. And so banter is only banter if there's an even playing field, and really a joke is only a joke if even the target of the joke finds it funny.
So how is us defining this at this point, Clint, speaking to what's happening with you?
So, and you know, we've also spoken when we were talking about social media apps and the extent to which bullying occurs on those, whether you're being bullied by people or by algorithms or whatever it is. But one of the things that we said, one of the most simplest things, is that if you're being bullied by someone online and you're feeling uncomfortable or someone's saying hurtful things that you don't appreciate, you have the ability to log off. You have the ability to block someone. There are tools that are available that allow us to manage our experience online. Now, as you know, I happen to be a free speech advocate. I understand that Facebook's not a free speech platform. We're governed by the tools of service there. But I like to have robust conversations on my feed. I think they're important. They highlight interesting things. And so even if someone says nasty or mean things to me, I don't care, because we're having a conversation. But in the last couple of weeks, what I've noticed is that people have come to my page, which is like sort of going into someone's house when you go to someone's page, right? But people have come to my page and have hurled insults at me. Like, you're disgusting because you put the names of some of the people that are working for Elon Musk. Or more recently, I didn't post, one of the things I've been accused of is that I didn't post enough about Israel. So therefore, I must be anti-Israel if I'm not posting something about Israel, which is just absurd on its face as a criticism. But not only that, what I did was I called them out on it, because the people who were leveling these accusations at me and saying that I'm not Jewish enough, I mean, maybe I'm not. I don't really practice anything to do with it. I love the traditions. I'm not, give me a bacon cheeseburger any day, I'll love it. So I don't adhere to the religious precepts. There's a lot in the religion I don't like, but that's irrelevant, actually. It's my choice how much of a religion or how much tradition, whether it's being gay or being Jewish, whatever identities or what components of my identities I embrace. Up to me how much to embrace, how much to talk about.
100%.
And so I was accused of not posting. So there was this hostage situation that happened in Israel that everyone knows about, and two very young little kids and their mother were murdered. And collectively, Israel was devastated in the last couple of days, understandably. I mean, it's a horrific story, no matter who you are, no matter what religion you are. No, if you're just a human being, you can't not be horrified and upset by that kind of a story. But I can take on that story without having to performatively post about it. And I do think people who post about it, sure, you want to draw attention to it, etc., etc. But I saw it posted everywhere, like orange hearts and orange hair, just like there was a complete deluge for me that I saw everywhere. I didn't feel a need that I needed to post it just to show people. And so I was accused of not being empathetic enough, not caring, of being that kind of a Jew. Literally was told that I'm that kind of a Jew. The type that wouldn't post something like that. Implying that I therefore must support Hamas. Like that's the... Right?
You know what? It's... Both of us are born and raised Jewish by birth. Both of us went to a Jewish day school. We both learned Hebrew. We learned Jewish studies. You know what, people? I have not been inside a shul / temple / synagogue, or whatever you want to call it, in 40 years. I respect people who do. You mentioned having a bacon and cheeseburger. That's usually my meal of choice on Yom Kippur. I kid you not. On Yom Kippur, I'm the Jew who goes out and has a bacon and cheeseburger because it is wrong on so many levels. Based on what? Based on other people's view of how they are practicing their religion. The reason that I do it is not to say fuck you. The reason I do it is because while I am a traditionalist from the point of view of respecting traditions like Passover and the New Year from a point of view of being at a friend's house. For example, if I'm invited to a friend for a dinner on Friday night or on one of the hourly days, I will fall in line with them because I'm in their home, just like being on somebody's Facebook page. I'm in their home, and therefore I fall in line out of respect to them. If I was not going to respect their space, I wouldn't go. That doesn't make me a hypocrite. It makes me respectful of somebody else's space.
Absolutely.
And when I'm not in their space, and I've had open conversations with them, and I say, you know, guys, for me, being spiritual, having a connection with whatever the higher force, the universe, whatever you want to call he, she, they, them, God is. Oops. I respect whatever spiritual and religious something everybody finds in their way, but don't impose it on me or on anybody else, which is what people are doing on Clinton. And so Clinton is being bullied.
They're attempting to bully me. They're attempting to bully me, but I'm not letting them have it. And I think that's the essence of what I wanted to, why I wanted us to have this conversation, is because, so when, and without getting political, I commented that the freezing of US aid to starving people around the world was problematic because that there would be children starving as a result of the freezing of aid. And it turned into a whole debate about, well, I care where my tax dollars go and it's fraud, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that someone said to me, this was yesterday, right, based on this, is told someone else who is also hurling these accusations at me, specifically said, the pseudo-intellectual hypocrites could not even take the time to post about the horrendous day for Jews around the world today. That should tell you all you need to know about their so-called morals and belief system.
You see, I've got such a fucking problem with that. This is going to cause a lot of shit for me, and I don't care. It's people like that who make me understand anti-Semitism. I am proudly Jewish. I wear the sayings of Hillel that are philosophy. They're not religion. I wear my Hebrew name on my arm. I'm proud of my birthright. Because I don't fall in with the masses, I fall into the same category as you, Clinton. I'm just not as vocal as you, but and who the hell are you, the other people of our community, to tell me how I should and shouldn't be Jewish, and how you should and you should and shouldn't be Jewish?
So exactly, and this is not the first time that there are like 2 or 3 of these people that are repeat offenders, if you will. So last time, because I didn't post about, I don't post enough about Israel, are you Jewish? They even asked. Are you even Jewish? And so when
what I want to know is what did they have to talk about or identify with 80 years ago when Israel didn't exist?
Well,
I mean, it's a country that is not even 80 years old. And just by the way, FYI, for the record, I I have an Israeli passport. And for no other reason than my father was living in Palestine as a young man when it became Israel in 1948. So he automatically he became a citizen of the new state. And by Israeli law, even though I was born in the diaspora, by Israeli law, I am considered an Israeli. In fact, when I turned 18, I had to file papers to argue against being in the army because I was conscripted because I am the son of an Israeli, but I was exempt because I had never been to Israel at that point. I never lived in Israel at that point. So I always consider Israel an independent state. There are Christian Israelis, there are Arab Israelis, there are all sorts of other, there are Hindu Israelis. So the fucking ownership and insistence that nothing else matters other than Israel just fucks with me.
But you see, here's the thing. This is what they do. Okay, so now you're having to justify why you may or may not post. So yes, you're giving the credentials that you have, that you are actually an Israeli by virtue of your passport, but you shouldn't even if you weren't. That's my point. We end up having to have these conversations, and then I have to defend why I may or may not post something. And so where this escalated is that I wasn't prepared to not speak back. And I called their posting, if the expectation is that I just post something to prove that I'm a bona fide Jew, by their definitions of what that represents or what I need to do, I'm not impressed by their smug performative bullshit, is basically what I said. Because so what, I explained to them how that just because they have a selfish worldview and that they don't deem the starving of some child who doesn't have food as important as the child who was murdered by Hamas terrorists. So, equally horrific situations as far as I'm concerned. We can debate which is worse. For the kids, I don't think they care. Both of them are horrific, dying of starvation or dying of strangulation. Each of them are equally horrific. And so I pointed that out. And when I had pointed that out before, I was accused of, just banged the mic, sorry. I was accused of left-wing hysteria, okay? Left-wing hysteria. And so because I'm not afraid of these people, and because the reason I wanted us to talk about what bullying is and isn't, they called me a bully.
Yeah, I was about to say that they're attacking what we're doing, and they are basically saying, how can you be an advocate and how can you be doing all the work we're doing? And they're using their points of view and their worldview and their measure of what they think is the right way to be a Jew. They are using that to attack the very important work that you and I are doing.
Exactly. So let me make this crystal clear, and then we can move on to other incidents. When someone levels accusations at you or communicates things that are wrong or ugly or unempathetic or whatever it is, You responding to those, you defending yourself, you calling out someone on their shit is not bullying them. There's no disproportionate abuse of power here. This is, so them trying to call me and calling me bully boy and trying to throw accusations at me like that stigma would stick, you're really barking up the wrong tree. Because I don't give a fuck what you think. And I know, and you know, that it's not bullying. And you know what the other thing they do is they say that, oh, I'm not going to be bullied. I pity bullies, but give it your best shot. But at the same time, they're gaslighting you because they're playing the victim. You don't need to buy into that bullshit. I'm a fighter, so I like getting involved in the fray. But you don't have to. If someone's behaving like the jackasses that these guys are, jackasses as they say in America, then block them, delete them, unfriend them. You don't need that bullshit in your life.
Yeah, I mean,
that's just yeah.
You've always been one who enjoys the engagement, and so you also, while it is important enough for you to actually voice and talk about here, you also know that going right back to your court case, that you are going to do things and you're going to present things out there that are going to be controversial.
Sure.
And you aren't a stranger to people not agreeing with you or you not agreeing with them.
Exactly. And again, it's water off a duck's back for me. But if they think they're trying to fuck with our brand because we are about harm reduction when it comes to bullying, and it is what we do.
Yeah.
And if they think that by leveling those accusations at me, that in some way they're harming my reputation or doing any kind of damage, guess what? All you've done is give us absolute food for content as to why we do what we do,
yeah,
and why your bullshit and limited understanding of what bullying is serves to help people. So thank you for that. And now we can move on to...
Let's move from one religion to another. Social media is awash with polarization and, yes, bullying of Cynthia Harivo, who has very, very deliberately and controversially been cast in the role, and I'm saying this very specifically, she's been cast in the role of Jesus Christ, in Jesus Christ Superstar. She's not playing Jesus Christ. She's been cast in the role. Now, I see that wording, she's playing a role. She's not assuming who everybody might have an idea of who Jesus Christ is. And it's like at a time when America's trying to rewrite history and scrub anything that is about diversity and inclusion off any websites and internet and searches and whatever. This flies in the face of that. And it's got people hysterical. I think it's wonderful.
I mean, it's so, the irony is that, the depictions that I grew up seeing and that a lot of Americans think is Jesus as this, very white, forlorn with the long hair and the beard and the sandals and sort of gently walking along. I mean, it's that's the image. But he was a Middle Easterner.
He was a Jew.
Yeah, he looked like a typical you know, like Sabre Israeli kind of a thing. I think so, if I'm getting it right. Don't berate me for getting the wrong thing. But just like a hairy, dark-skinned Jew with curly hair and not the long, forlorn beard and the fat. It wasn't that. But yet that's the depiction. And so, in fact, having Cynthia represent her is better than having, you know, Ryan Reynolds, for example. Closer likeness, let's just say.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Jesus Christ Superstar is 55 years old. People have forgotten, and this is all about socio-political and socio-cultural times. When it was released in 1970, first of all, let me say that I was exposed to the studio recording, the classic studio recording with Ian Gillan from Deep Purple playing Jesus. I was exposed to that recording at 9 years old.
Sure.
And that recording was so impactful on me that it's the reason I got into musical theatre. I was listening to something that I didn't know what I was listening to, but I just knew it was going to change the whole direction of my life. That had nothing really to do with the story, but had to do with what I was hearing. Be that as it may, when it opened in New York in 1970, people have forgotten, and there are news items on this and there are stories about this, that there was picketing outside the theatre, that it was blasphemous, that it was anti-religious, that it was anti-Christian, blah, 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 and how quickly that all went away. And then suddenly, in the socio-political, cultural world in which we now live, it's the same piece has raised another furor. And people are going, but it can't be played by a woman, it can't be played by a black person.
Well, yeah, so what is the bullying going on?
It's people who feel that, who are either pro-religious or pro-traditionalist in both religion and in musical theatre, are going, this is a bridge too far.
Because she's black.
Because she's a woman.
Because she's queer. And identifies as queer.
And it's pushing people's buttons. It's become a trend now. Like, you look at a couple of weeks ago, the Super Bowl. I mean, both Taylor Swift and Jason Kelce had to deal with fan bullying. Taylor got booed by the opposing team's fans. How short-sighted they are, because what they have very quickly forgotten, as opposed to looking at her and going, last year, she was the reason that the Super Bowl had the highest viewership historically ever, because she was bringing an audience into American football that would never have come into it.
And not only that, just one thing to add to that, because I saw the article yesterday, I believe it was. I can't remember whether it was Fortune or Forbes. I think it was Fortune. Did an analysis that she's increased the value of the NFL by $1 billion since last year.
But let's boo her.
Let's boo her.
Okay, but let's boo her because tight end's girlfriend. But guess what, people? Do you know how Taylor deals with bullying? It'll be on her next album, and she'll make another $1 billion from that. So keep on keeping on. The other problem, and you can tell the story, is Jason.
So with Jason Kelsey, who used to play for the Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles, who played once again, so it was a repeat Super Bowl performance because it was the Eagles against the Kansas City Chiefs. And Travis Kelsey plays for the Chiefs, tight end, as you said, and Jason used to play for the Eagles. But he retired after last year's Super Bowl, and but he's still very popular, does this podcast with his brother, and just with the whole Taylor thing, and his wife's got the most popular, like unseated Joe Rogan for having the most popular podcast. And so like the Taylor effect is, she has an effect on anything she touches, but the closer you get, the more intense that gets. So he's been very much in the spotlight, along with his brother. But because this time he wasn't playing, he was like in a bind. On the one hand, he wanted his brother, who he loves and supports, to win. And on the other hand, he wanted his former team that he loves and supports to win. So it was a challenge for him. He didn't choose. What he did was he expressed how difficult it was. And then how he understood how difficult it was for his parents to have to straddle the fence when it came to that, because both sons played for different teams. And so, of course, for diehard Philadelphia fans who don't like Taylor, the ones who were booing whenever they saw Taylor and who booed Travis, are the same people who didn't appreciate that Jason didn't unequivocally support the Eagles, that he expressed the vulnerability of being torn. But the same way as we said in the beginning, where I'm not going to allow those people trying to make me react or trying to upset me or to tarnish our brand, he also didn't allow those people to get to him. He's unapologetic about the dilemma he was in.
What you said there is part and parcel of a separate episode we want to have in the sporting world. But what that is, and because that happened now in the sporting world, what we're seeing, and it goes back to Beckham and Owen Farrell and various other ones.
Harry Maguire.
Who there is this mob mentality bullying. Like, it's almost like that's the way the mob is going, and that is it, and if you don't follow the mob, you get bullied. So,
or if you do anything that displeases the mob, or you say the wrong thing, or you make a mistake on the field, or you do something that meets their disapproval of the perfectionist standards that they hold you to, and then they feel that they have the right to just go full out en masse, like tell you what a stupid arsehole you are.
Throughout history, how easily people are swayed. We've seen it historically. You can go and look right back centuries and millennia. Essentially, people en masse can't think for themselves. And once there is somebody who tells them something, more than once, it's the story, and we're seeing it play out in history right now. Tell somebody something more than once and repeat it at least 3 times, and they'll start believing it. So what happens is there is somebody who begins this mob this mob mentality, and it becomes infectious. And those of us who go against that risk the disproportionate abuse of their power.
Yep.
Because there's disrespect of differing opinions. And, you know, we unpack this whole thing in our keynote of how you learn very early on in life, and it's usually in the home, where you're taught the people who are different or who have different opinions and different ideas. You can either teach them that to have respect, and the people who are different are just different, or have different opinions, just have different opinions, and they're also valid. You can either teach them that there is respect for that, or that the only way I can be right is if you're wrong. And if you're wrong, I must destroy you. And even if you're right, if you don't agree with me, you're wrong.
No, I mean, it's gotten out of control. And I mean, we were talking last week, or last podcast, about what cancel culture is and how, you know, one of the people who's accusing me of being a bully said, "Oh, you think that any part of cancel culture is okay?" But to a certain degree, the original intentions behind why you cancelled someone were legitimate. You know, what choice did you have but to, if you witnessed someone like Harvey Weinstein and you wanted to demonstrate that you didn't appreciate him raping actresses, then one way to do that you could exert your power is in the marketplace, and you can opt to not see those movies and encourage others to do the same. That's fine. Boycotting is a legitimate thing. There's nothing wrong with boycotting. You know, yes, it's used against things that I approve of. You know, if someone's going to boycott Wicked or boycott Jesus Christ Superstar, go ahead. It's your right to voice that opinion. It's your right to say how irate you are. It's your right to stand there with a sign and say, by all means, you're entitled to do that. It's when you start imposing that on others and bullying others into standing with you that it shifts that right. Because then it's no longer...
I can tell you now, on August 1, there's going to be demonstrations and picketing outside the Hollywood Bowl, of all places.
And sure, and do that. You know, some of the most important First Amendment fights in America have been around whether or not you can protest outside an abortion clinic. And the fights haven't been so much about whether or not you can stand there with your sign. It's about how close you can get to physically intimidating a woman who's going to get an abortion. Maybe because she was raped by a terrorist and doesn't want to have the baby. Whatever the reasons are, that becomes, you know, where does your right to voice your opinion stop? And clearly where it stops is when you're infringing on someone else's constitutional right to exercise their right, whether it is to an abortion or to speak back and say the same thing.
What is such a common theme throughout so many of these things is we're living in a time in history, and the circles come around again. This is all reminiscent of 100 years ago, in the first half of last century, and we're now halfway through the first half of the century. That in all walks of life, there is such a disrespect for somebody who doesn't agree with you. And it's, sadly, looking at your story, Clint, looking at the at the story of what's happening with Cynthia Erivo and various other stories. I mean, one other which I think we should just look at, which also feeds into this, is what happened in this past week in Texas with a Hispanic teenager,
Right.
who committed suicide because she was bullied by a group of teenagers who threatened to report her to ICE and have her deported. And she chose suicide over being deported. What does that tell you?
Or having her parents threatening to have her parents deported.
Yeah.
And without getting into the politics of it, because we are entering an age where the politics is ugly and the policies are ugly. And no matter what side, no matter who you support, you can have tough immigration. You can have a tough immigration policy where it's much harder. America, despite America traditionally, having the Statue of Liberty with the bring us your tired and your poor and your hungry, not anymore. Sending away the tired and the poor and the hungry, and sending them to fucking Guantanamo, where our torture chambers, America's torture chambers at this point. But the point, you can still support strong immigration policies without it having to be cruel. There were, even when they were trying to enforce them before, you didn't go into a school, you didn't go into a place of worship or to a hospital, because there was just like a sacredness about those institutions that was sacrosanct, and you didn't violate those. And now that's over. And so threatening someone that you're going to call ICE on their parents is a very, very legitimate threat. It's not just a casual bullying kind of a thing. That's dangerous, clearly. So,
but it is a form of it is such a form of a disproportionate abuse of power.
Absolutely.
We're living in a time when there is lack of respect for humanity. Regardless of your choices, regardless of your religion, regardless of your sexuality, regardless of whether you're black, white, or green, the world is being stripped historically and being cleansed historically of that kind of respect of other and different. And it will come around again, because history tells us it will. It's not going to be in the next year. It might be by the middle of the century. But in the meantime, we are forging ahead. And we are trying to be a voice of not putting other people down. Yes, calling people on their bullshit is one thing. And there's a difference between calling somebody on their bullshit versus disrespecting their opinions.
Yeah, and listen, and you actually don't even have to respect someone's opinions. I mean, in these instances, I don't. Their opinions are vile, as far as I'm concerned. They have every right to express them, and I have every right to say what I think of them.
Right.
But at the same time, don't let people accuse you of being a bully for voicing your opinion or standing up to someone or refusing to be intimidated or bullied by someone because you're not adhering to their standard. Whether you're just one person like me or whether you're Owen Farrell, the captain of English rugby. It's that simple. I think that's maybe a good note to end on.
Yeah. and that a lot has happened in this episode. It's been a passionate one, and I think you can see, guys, how the shit fires us up.
Absolutely.
So
We
we're
still
going to
want
keep all these current issues coming up in the podcast.
Absolutely. And we still want to hear from you. We still want to hear from you. We did an interesting keynote last week at a school, and these stories are really important. And the more we hear from you, the better this podcast is going to be and the more impactful the work we're doing is. So please stay in touch with us and communicate with us.
Yep.
Till next time.
Cheers.